Hello and welcome back to The Hatch. I'm Sammy Roth.
And I'm Rosie Murphy. This is the podcast where we talk about Lost.
This week we are having the distinct pleasure of discussing Stranger in a Strange Land, which is Season 3, Episode 9. You'll remember that it is a Jack flashback.
It's been a long time coming. This, of course, is the infamous episode where we find out the origin of Jack's tattoos. Generally much reviled among the fandom.
as we will discuss. And we also have more from our interview with Alan Dale, who plays Charles Widmore, which fortunately has nothing to do with the episode we're watching. So hang around for that. As always on The Hatch, we start with our hot takes about the episode. I feel like this could be an all hot take episode if we wanted it to, but we'll try to limit it to one apiece. Rosie, what do you got?
So, what is the point of Isabel? The other who they just introduce, who is able to speak the language in which Jack's tattoos are written and kind of needle him about it. She says she's like the sheriff among the others.
Tom says that, to be fair, but yes.
Tom says that. I just don't see the point of introducing that character. She's not particularly interesting. Her role is never expanded upon. She's never seen again. Surely one of the others could have spoken Chinese and, fulfilled this purpose. I don't know. I don't get it.
I think that's an excellent question and one of many that I also have about this episode.
What is your hot take?
You nailed it, though. I mean, she's there to read the language of the tattoos. That's clearly her only purpose. She's never brought back again. Yeah. Anyway.
What's your hot take, Sammy?
My hot take, so you know how everyone is always telling us how great Michael Giacchino's score is and how it elevates what's happening on screen and how it picks up, scenes that aren't as good?
Yes.
I think I generally agree with that. Like, I love Giacchino's score. I did, however, think that it was pretty cringe-inducing when his, beautiful, melodic, tender music kept playing during the Jack and Achiro scenes in the flashbacks this episode.
Yeah.
It was just kind of unfortunate because the music is so good, but, the scenes are so bad. And the moment, it's like the moment Jack sees Achiro on the beach and that, tender, loving melody starts to play, and it's so gorgeous, and it's like, oh no, but this scene is so bad. Why is Giacchino's music associated with this? I felt weird watching it.
Yeah, because there's nothing tender about their relationship at all. It's transactional. Jack tries to get sort of more emotionally involved with Acharya, and she says, hey, we don't need to talk about your dad,
Yeah.
This doesn't need to be personal. And then Jack gets upset and almost threatens her when he wants to force her to tattoo him, and it's all very upsetting, and none of it is tender.
No, and it's just it's one of the few times where I think the music is just actually somehow makes it worse, not because it's bad, but because it's such a strong disconnect between
right, and because we know how good it can be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of, though, I mean, I think that, as we're going to do this, we're going to talk about the flashbacks. Mm-hmm. I would say it's more than, Jack seems to threaten Achiro. I think that this is yet another really unfortunate example reminiscent of the last Jack flashback when he and Sarah are going through their divorce, of Jack, just being a real creeper. She doesn't want him to follow her around and figure out what she's doing. He does. It's kind of again, kind of bordering on stalking.
It's, intrusive at best.
At best. And then he pins her up against the wall and demands that she gives him a tattoo.
Right. And she declines and declines and declines. And, she caves, presumably because she's kind of afraid of him.
Right. And I think she seems to have reason to be. He seems like he's a little bit unhinged.
Yeah.
It's not great.
No, it's upsetting. Yeah, and she's pretty straightforward about not wanting to do it, and says, this is something that, the whole gift thing is whatever. God. But,
yeah,
this isn't for you. This is something I do sort of within my own community, and you're not part of that, and this isn't for you. And Jack just refuses to hear that.
Yep. I think that was my biggest of the many problems with the flashbacks. Did you have other particularly notable grievances you want to bring up?
I have have two things. One, to build on your comments. I get that Jack is, in Thailand, presumably after his divorce, and is going through some stuff and is sort of there to quote unquote.
So you're in Phuket to find yourself.
Why would you say that?
You're an American.
Yeah,
but
sure.
No introspection at all, right? Like Jack spends zero time thinking about what he's done or how he might make amends or how he might change or...
well, certainly if he does, we're given no sign of that in this episode.
Right. And instead he wants to force her to tell him who he is, right?
Because
I think part of what is trying to be done with this episode is that the writers are sort of trying to tell us, like, Jack doesn't know who he is and he's searching for answers and, oh, lo and behold, here's someone who can tell him. And instead of sort of bothering to do that work for himself, he just demands that she tell him.
I like that. I like that point a lot. That's so true.
Yeah, which at least I guess is kind of a rationale for this episode. It doesn't exactly make it more enjoyable or less cringeworthy, but I think that's what is happening here. Secondly, Jack's tattoo doesn't exactly translate to "he walks among us but is not one of us," at least according to, Lostpedia, the record of all things.
Oh, well, what does it actually say? I'd forgotten that.
So it's a tattoo apparently that Matthew Fox actually has and had before the filming of Lost began.
Okay.
It is a line from a poem by Mao Zedong.
Sorry, Matthew Fox has a line from a poem by Mao Zedong tattooed on his arm?
He does.
Okay, continue.
Allegedly. Again, this is sourced from Lostpedia.
No, you're right. Source of all wisdom and knowledge. I'm in.
Okay, so the line, these four characters translate roughly to something like eagles fly upon the sky or eagles strike the sky. And apparently in the context of the poem, the eagles are a symbol of like creatures that are free or are fighting to be free. And again, I'm just going to read you the Lostpedia page here. The traditional gloss of the line also sees the eagles as representatives of the gifted members of society using and displaying their abilities.
Huh.
So maybe that is part of what's going on here?
Yeah, and frankly, I also wasn't sure about Jack's response. That may be what they say, but it's not what they mean. Like, is he saying that what he thinks they mean is that the thing that Achara, like, speechified at him about, like, that you're a hero, but you're frightened?
You're a great man, but that makes you lonely?
Yeah. Like, what?
I mean, I think those can kind of mean the same thing. I have no idea what Jack means when he says, that's what it says, that's not what it means.
No.
Because he walks among us, but is not one of us is like, it's kind of a letdown. Like when you hear that at the end of this episode,
especially after the scene earlier where there's like the mystery. Ooh, she knows what his tattoo says. Like that's actually a pretty good scene with just a poor payout.
It feels like just kind of a weak pun.
Yeah. Like,
oh, haha, he's among the others. Like he walks among us, but is not one of us. Like, disappointing.
Extremely. And and there's that moment in the flashback where. And I think this just speaks to the lunacy and the ludicrousness of this flashback, but where Achara says to him, if I do this, there will be consequences.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, there aren't any consequences. Yes, Jack gets beaten up on the beach, but this never comes up again. The tattoos have no significant meaning. Like, you can't write lines like that and then just, have no consequences.
Yeah, and also, I mean, the whole treatment of Thailand as like a place where white men go to find themselves. I was just like, yuck. Yeah,
it was, I would say there was definitely like an exoticization of the whole place and the people there.
Yeah.
And the fact that this was where Jack got these, mysterious cryptic tattoos.
Right, it was, it's Eastern, it's Orientalized, it's, mystical because it's from this place, and like it just felt like very heavy on the tropes, like kind of lazy stereotypes.
No, I agree with you, and I mean it's right from the beginning when the first scene where that kid on the beach is trying to sell Jack a Coke, and all he can say is Dr. Jack, Dr. Jack. That's the only English he's got, and it's like they really didn't need to do any of this.
No, they didn't, and whether or not Acharya is like a woman who sort of does the tattoos for work, it's not super clear, but certainly Jack doesn't respect her. I mean, she's just kind of a prop for him to manipulate while he figures out whatever the hell he's trying to figure out. And
yeah, no, I'm with you. It's hard to fully articulate everything that's problematic about it, but it's definitely a problematic. I mean, in addition to just being a poor story, it's problematic from the perspective of Jack's actions, as we discussed, and from the perspective of the treatment of the place.
Yeah. Which Lost is normally pretty good about, which is kind of what makes this disappointing.
Yeah, I agree.
So much of what we talked about is, how diverse the cast is, how they'll do whole, what feel like whole episodes in other languages when they're set in other places. And then we get this, and you're just kind of like, come on.
Well, I mean, this is why they let them end the show. Right? Ugh. I mean... Anyway, no serious disrespect intended to the writers and producers and everything. It's an anomaly what they've done here.
Right. Which is part of what the bar is so high that when something like this comes along, it's disappointing by comparison. Yeah.
Makes expose look like an act of utter brilliance. Actually, I think expose is an act of utter brilliance, so I take that back. We'll talk about that in a couple of weeks.
We'll discuss soon. Ugh.
I thought there was actually some good stuff this episode on the island. I didn't think it was all trash.
Go on.
It's frustrating because you would have a scene like the sort of interrogation scene where it was named Isabel asks Jack, did Juliet really, tell you to kill Ben? And there's a great amount of tension in that room, and he's like, what is Jack going to say? Is he going to lie to protect her? Is he going to tell the truth? And then he lies, but then rather than develop that scene, it's immediately actually, I don't want to do this. Goodbye. Take me back to my cage. I really wanted that scene to play out. And I kind of felt the same way, the scene with Jack and Ben where Ben is back on the operating table, I thought was another really wonderful scene where Ben had, some wonderful, Ben with his face down on the table type one-liners the cavalry has arrived at last, and your bedside manner leaves something to be desired, Jack.
Yeah, and I also quite appreciated...
We had an excellent surgeon, Jack. His name was Ethan.
But then you have that scene, which I think is very good, and then immediately cut to, Jack in a bar in Thailand. So, I don't know. I mean, the stuff with Isabel could have been interesting. I thought the Kate Sawyer subplot was, interesting until the resolution ended up being that apparently Kate is guilty that she had sex with Sawyer, which seemed like a pretty unsatisfying conclusion to that whole thing.
Yeah.
I don't know what you made of that, but it's it felt like it was going somewhere interesting, and then it just kind of fizzled to me.
Yeah. It felt like there was actually sort of a tactical disagreement in terms of, do we go back and get Jack? What do we need to do to keep surviving? And
right, should Carl stay with us or should we get rid of him?
Right, and I don't know, it doesn't seem like Kate would have been guilty or would have felt guilty about that.
Right, it seemed to be a story about, to me I thought it was a story about Kate wants to go back and save Jack, and Sawyer doesn't want Jack back because he's worried about, competing with Jack for Kate.
The love triangle.
And then it just turns out to be sort of a weird sideways version of that doesn't make as much sense.
Yeah, it seems like the source of the emotional conflict here should be Sawyer and not Kate.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Yeah, because it seems like Kate should be, from the beginning, has said, we're not leaving without Jack. This doesn't have to be about a love triangle. All three of us can survive this, and, it's possible, but we need to protect each other. Whereas Sawyer would be whatever, let him go. I'm going to sort of make sure that I get to keep Kate for myself, or I don't know. Yeah. I didn't like the way that worked out.
No. And I thought that I thought that the interesting thing about Carl, Sawyer, seemingly they sort of like started to touch on this idea, but then transitioned to the weird guilt thing. But like the idea seeming to be that Sawyer wanted Carl to get out of there because he didn't want a way for them to be led back to the others' camp. Like he knew that Sawyer was going to want Carl to lead them back to the others' camp to rescue Jack. So, he wanted Carl out of there. Like, because I can't think of a better explanation for why. I mean, there's no way Sawyer is really sold on this, like, puppy love thing that he has to go back for her because this is the one that counts. Like, Sawyer is too jaded for that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think maybe Sawyer's thinking far enough ahead in terms of, well, if Carl stays with us, Kate can use him or whatever. But I think it's probably more just like Sawyer doesn't want to deal with him.
That's also a possibility. I mean, frankly, I don't want to deal with Carl, so I don't blame Sawyer for that.
I don't mind Carl.
Sorry, I've been just shitting on Carl the whole time. I feel bad about that.
I mean, well, then the other plot point in this episode is Juliet's trial / she's going to be executed, and then Ben intervenes to save her, but she is quote unquote marked, which is like she's branded basically with that symbol. And what is that about?
Absolutely nothing. The symbol, the marking.
Yeah, it's not a symbol we've ever seen before.
No, it's not a symbol we're ever going to see again, I don't think.
Yeah, correct us if we're wrong, but I don't recall it. And the branding thing just seems so out of left field. Like, I get that maybe they're trying to do a parallel between Juliet and Jack.
Yes.
But what? I don't know.
Yeah, and that's, to me, another example of, like, a kind of weird, disappointing ending to what I otherwise thought was a pretty interesting storyline. The thing about, the fact that the others have this seemingly semi-independent, law enforcement figure, and that they have, if not a trial, then some kind of public sentencing. I don't remember if they used that word, but it's clearly some form of, like, formalized justice.
Yeah,
that they're supposed to be having.
And it sounds like they have an established sort of code of the wages of X is Y. So if you murder one of us, you face the death penalty.
Yeah.
So presumably this has happened before, and they've established this criminal code, such as it were.
And the scene I found most interesting was when Ben goes to give her the commutation of her sentence, and when Isabel is reading that note that he sent in front of Tom and Jack and Alex, and she reads the note and she says, okay, and Ben says, the rules don't apply in this case for whatever reason. And I don't know, I'm kind of fascinated by the idea that clearly the others are basically a dictatorship, a weak dictatorship, because Ben's facing leadership challenges all the time to his authority. But, like, clearly Ben is in charge, whatever Ben says goes, but they still seem to have, like, at least this fiction of, being a rules-based or, somewhat democratic society. But, the moment Ben wants to throw these rules out the window, it's like they're gone. So I was interested in that concept. Again, it kind of fizzles, but it's an interesting idea of how the other society works. Except that I kind of think it's bullshit because to me all really happening here, the rules don't apply, is that Ben wants his own life to be saved again. So he gets to do what he wants.
Right.
Like, the special circumstances that Juliet was doing what she needed to do to save Ben's life.
Right, because they had made this sort of pact of, of a kind.
Yeah.
She had to save Ben's life, and Ben would let her go, and
now Jack has to save Ben's life again, so...
Oh, dear.
It's only uphill from here. Everything gets better after this.
That's largely true.
Largely. Well, we did it. Look, we've talked about Stranger in a Strange Land. Let's do our hindsights and move on to the interview, right?
That's what we do.
What
what's
kind
your
of hindsight do you got? Oh, okay. Well, I've got two quick ones.
Great.
One is that just in the first scene when Kate says to Sawyer,
We have to go back.
Wonderful foreshadow, intentional or not, of the final moments of this season. And I think just sort of a nice speaking to of Kate and Jack being, you think they'd be on the same page about this, that you never leave someone behind, live together, die alone. And of course, at the end of this season, Jack says we have to go back, and Kate says, no, we don't.
Right.
So she kind of switches roles after they get off the island. And then just to go back to the issue of Michael Giacchino's score, that scene at the end when Jack and Juliet are like on the boat staring out at the water and this soaring music starts to play. Mm-hmm. I didn't realize it. I recognized it because it's the same theme that you hear at the end of The Incident on the season 5 score when Juliet is down in the hatch banging on the bomb.
Wow.
Or when she's falling down the hatch, excuse
Right.
me, when Sawyer's trying to save her. And I looked it up, and it's a track called Oceans Apart from the season 3 soundtrack, and it turns out it basically becomes Juliet's theme.
Wow.
Which I never realized, but I recognized it because I listened to that track all the time from The Incident. It's one of my favorite tracks, and it just, not quite as good a scene here for that track to accompany, but wonderful, wonderful score and one of my favorite bits of Giacchino's work.
Yeah, good catch.
What's your hindsight?
The very brief discussion that Juliet and Jack have when they're explaining to Jack that we're not on, the island, we're on this other island, we need to go back to our island so that you can sort of give Ben this long-term care. And Juliet says to Jack, this other place, the main island, Ben calls it home. Which was just an interesting reminder of what we talked about with Not in Portland and what we know to be true about Ben, which is that this really is his home, despite being the person with maybe the most freedom of movement in terms of going back to the quote-unquote real world and coming back here. And this is really and truly sort of his home, and his entire meaning, his entire existence is here. And
Right.
I don't know.
Well,
just a nice little chord that they struck before moving on to other more disappointing scenes.
And perhaps to help turn that into a little bit more of a hindsight, I mean, it speaks to the ending of Ben's character where he decides that he wants to go down with the ship, or, he's not leaving. If the ship is going down, he's going down with it. And then he ends up staying on the island.
Yeah.
Because it's all he knows. It's all he cares about.
Right.
Anyway.
Speaking of people who have at one time called the island home.
Solid transition.
I was reaching on that one, but
No.
We are back with the second part of Sammy's conversation with Alan Dale, who, of course, played Charles Widmore. Does not appear in this episode, but did appear last week in Flashes Before Your Eyes.
Did you watch the show while, the stuff you weren't in?
Yeah.
You're making a little bit of a face at me.
I am making a face because there was a bit of stuff went on about that.
I saw an interview that you did, which is maybe what you're thinking of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what happened was I was I did that Spam-A-Lot, and then 2 or 3 other shows got me over to do episodes. One of them was Moving Wallpapers, which is a comedy, and as part of the promotion of it, we did one of those press junkets where I sat in a room and different journalists came in for 20 minutes and talked to me, and then they, that sort of thing. We're in London. And we'd sort of finished the interview, and it was cold, it was London. And so we're both putting our coats on and things ready to leave. And she said to me, so tell me a bit about Lost. And I said, oh, what do you want to know about Lost? And she said, well, you must have some, behind-the-scenes things, and what's the story about this and that? And I said, truthfully, I don't watch it that much. And she said, you don't watch it? Why not? And I said, well, to be honest, after about 3 seasons of watching it, I was sitting there watching it one night, and I was thinking, every week I watch the show, and what I actually watch is this bunch of people sweating a lot walking through the jungle in line astern.
Right.
And I thought, I don't really know why I'm doing this, because it's not interesting me very much. And then just as I was thinking this, out of the trees came, it looked like drawn by pencil, a wind thing that came out of the trees, picked up this African-American actor and threw him against a tree and killed him.
Yeah, you're thinking Mr. Echo gets killed by the smoke. Yes.
So, and I thought, I don't know why I'm watching this at all. And that was, so I don't. And I said that to her. Well, as it turned out, she was the Mirror. And they're a real tabloid.
Yes.
Headline the next day, Lost star commits career suicide.
I didn't know that.
That was the headline. So so yeah, that was that. I would have thought that Gene might have mentioned that because I think it didn't go down that well with them, and I think that's probably one of the reasons why I never became a regular on the show.
They kept bringing you back though.
They did,
yeah,
because the character was so fun. He was so interesting.
Yeah.
And I really, really enjoyed it. I mean, I have to say, they were nice people, and I've no criticism at all of the production and the people and things.
So did you come back and watch the finale after everything, or what? Or did you ever pick the show back up?
Oh yeah, I mean, look, I mean, when I told that story because you tell stories, but my wife never missed an episode,
okay.
And my son, who lives in England, he didn't either. So and although I did think of leaving because of of saying to them, look, I won't do this anymore because of the other commitments I had and things, and my wife would never let me because she loved the show so much. So
So I told you, Sonia said that she thought your character was totally irredeemable. Ian Cusick, the one thing that he said that we should ask you if we ever got around to talking with you, he said, I never understood why Widmore kept calling me a coward. I didn't think that Desmond was a coward. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Ian, it wasn't me, it was Widmore.
Yes, and he knows, but I don't know. Why do you think Widmore hated him so much?
Oh, well, because I think, and I don't know, I've never had daughters, but I think that, when you've got a daughter, especially if you've got a guilty conscience about a daughter that you haven't really paid much attention to, I think that that's what it was about. It was just, he was jealous, I'm not sure the relationship between a father and a daughter, how that works, but I think there was probably a bit of jealousy there because he was, she was wanting to run off with him and things. And I think he had a strained relationship with his daughter, and Ian's character didn't help, I think.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And so I think that he just felt, well, fuck you, sort of thing. That's sort of how I think Widmore felt about Ian's character.
That makes sense to me. It's a little difficult because, like I was saying, you never even had a scene with Penny.
No.
So
we didn't ever know.
Such an important relationship on the show.
But she wasn't on it very much, was she?
She was on maybe even a little less than you, I think.
Oh, well, she was on quite a lot then.
Oh, yeah, she probably did about a dozen episodes in the end.
Right.
But, sporadic. I mean, in the last season, you got to come back and have fun on the island. She did not. She was not there.
No. So, I didn't really take much notice of her character. I mean, I met her that once and things, but they didn't ever write anything for me to do with her. And that little bit with Ian, which I thought was pretty scrummy, really. It was quite fun, those scenes.
Yeah.
And,
fun being an asshole to him.
Yeah, and he's a lovely actor, so we worked together well. I had good chemistry, really, as actors, I mean.
To ask one more about just how, because you're right, the show was convoluted, right? I mean, it was crazy stuff happening all the time. I'm a huge fan, and it was convoluted, and I felt that I was thinking about what I should ask you, and I think that the family dramas that your character was involved in, involving Penny and Desmond and. Later you have Eloise, played by Fionnuala Flanagan,
right?
Who you had, and you and her had
she'd
another.
Be my wife, I think.
Yeah, a partner of some kind,
right.
And it turned out Daniel Faraday, played by Jeremy Davies, was also your child, and there was time travel involved. Does that make your life any more difficult as an actor to try to deal with all of that crazy stuff, or are you still just
Well, because I wasn't a regular on the show.
Yeah.
I wasn't as involved in the storylines.
Right.
So, as I say, I would get the script, and that's when I would see that was what was happening. I didn't know in advance.
So you didn't have to worry about that. You just played what was on the page.
I just played what was on the page. That's all I ever did, really. That's all I could do. And then you'd be as creative as possible with that. But they never told me in advance where the character was going or where he had been. So you had to make it up yourself.
Yeah.
Make up your own little stories about where why he's like this and things, and try to make it as interesting as possible.
Do you think, and if this falls into the category of it's too long ago, you don't remember, I'll accept it and move on, but do you think Widmore redeems himself at all in the end, coming back and trying to save some of the folks on the island?
It's interesting because you've alluded to this a couple of times. I never got that feeling that that's why he was doing it.
Okay, interesting.
My feeling was, and the way I approached it was, as if he was still trying to control everything. That's all. And so he was doing what he had to do, he thought, to control things. As far as the time travel was concerned, I just ignored it because I didn't know what that was, where that came from, and where it was likely to be going. So I didn't worry about it. You know, I mean, I just worked out what I was going to do today in this scene, or in this next 10 days when we make this episode, I'll work out what I'm doing, because I'll be gone then for 3 or 4 episodes, and then I'll come back. So I won't, it won't actually, and I won't know until I see it on the screen.
Do people still ask you about Lost? I mean, how does it figure, I guess, in the arc of your career here in the States compared to other stuff you've done?
Well, it's probably, mostly people don't even realise that I was in it.
Huh.
And it's quite often that people will find out I'm an actor and they'll say, what were you in, and things, and then you sort of sit there and try to decide whether you're going to give them your resume or not. When you get to my age, it's 100 TV shows and a whole lot of movies. So you don't really know, but often people don't realise it was me. So I'm sitting talking to them and things, and then when I say to them, well, I played Charles Widmore in Lost. And they go, well, yes, I can see it now. Yeah, but they don't see me as him in normal life, I suppose, because normally I'm sort of like this.
Right, you're not wearing the fancy suit and tie and drinking McCutcheon whiskey at the moment. Yeah,
and my characters always tend to be in the fancy suits and things,
Yeah.
So it means that I never wear them if I don't have to.
Okay. Are there other? I mean, for a lot of fans, I mean, Lost is the pinnacle of serialized television.
Right.
For maybe this is a strange question, but for you, is it sort of just another show of the many you've done, or is there anything that stands out about it?
I'm talking to you about it, and you guys have, and this blog is sort of specifically about it, so I don't want to be dismissive about it, but it really was just another job. I wasn't even a regular on it. See, I was a regular on the OC. Right. Which I really enjoyed.
Which I apologise, I haven't seen that.
Right.
Either.
Well, if you did, you'd see that that I played an asshole there too. and it might just be that I'm an asshole. I don't know.
You don't seem like an asshole.
Well, thank you.
Invited me into your home to talk to you. It's very kind of you.
That's right.
What did you watch the finale of the show?
Yes, we watched it at Jimmy Kimmel Live. We were actually sitting in his studio watching it with all the audience.
So you saw it with everyone else?
Yeah, it's the first time we saw it, and there's a whole bunch of us there. Not everybody, but a whole bunch of the actors were there, and and as I say, I was a bit afraid that the audience might come after us with machetes, because they'd invested 7 years in a plane crash, whereas it looked like it was something else.
But that didn't happen.
No, people seemed charmed and delighted to meet us. And
any, in terms of stuff I haven't asked, any favorite stories or memories from the set, things that stand out in your mind?
Well, it was really, coming from down in New Zealand, which I'm a New Zealander, and then had years in Australia, that Hollywood and productions out of America were always like you revered them. And it was really interesting to find ourselves working in the studio that Magnum P.I. had been made in, and Hawaii 5-0 had been made in. And these are shows that I had, watched. And the reason that I had watched them was that where I grew up, we didn't get TV till I was in my mid-teens. We didn't, and then when we got TV, we had one television channel.
Wow.
So you watched TV or you didn't. It wasn't you chose, and there was no recording, of course. We didn't get that until 20 years ago. So, it's interesting, my background. So for me, being on Hawaii, first of all, it's romantic to be there anyway, and then to be there working, in facilities that had made these iconic shows that was pretty exciting. That's sort of it. And I'd met Matthew Fox up at the school, so to meet him out on the island and find that he was the star of the show it was sort of a bit, surreal. And what else? Not really. Nothing bad ever happened to me, but I was only a guest star. I was never a regular on the show.
I will tell you that one of my very favorite scenes on the whole show that I rewatched the other day preparing to come talk to you is the scene with you and Michael Emerson I think it's in your apartment in London, where you're sitting up in bed and you've got the whiskey by the bed, and it's such a spooky scene. It's dark, it's shadowy, you're threatening to kill each other's daughters. I don't know if
Did you notice that I had whiskers?
No, I didn't.
I had whiskers because I was King Arthur in Spamalot, and that was one of the 2 scenes they shot when they came to London. So they actually shot that like within yards of Buckingham Palace, believe it or not, where they must have spent a fortune on renting a house with a circular driveway right near Buckingham Palace. It must have been very expensive. And we just shot inside. They could have done it on a set anywhere. We could have done it behind the scenes in the theatre in Spamalot. It was just a room. Huh. But they'd hired this incredible house. I don't know what it... Anyway.
I guess they wanted it to look good, and it did.
Well, yeah, but, and I was in the middle of being King Arthur, so I would have been very British at the time. So I think Widmore would have been more British than I normally am, because I'm actually a New Zealander.
So you've alluded to this a few times, but I'll close with it. Tell me what you're working on now. Tell our listeners.
Well, I'm working on Dynasty, which is... why would I be doing that? Well, it's just a bit of fun. It's lightweight, and my character, again, is sort of... He's, last seen throwing bodies into a lake, but the funny part about it is it's into his own lake, and so that's a bit silly. If you're trying to hide a body, you wouldn't hide it in your own backyard.
Right.
But he does, so, I don't know.
You like to point out the flaws and inconsistencies in the shows you work on, I can tell.
I can tell.
I guess when you've had a long career and you can choose your roles, it's...
Yeah, it's sort of like that.
Yeah.
But when it comes to that, I have to be truthful. People ask me that, so how do you choose the roles? Sometimes people like things that are character-driven, and others like story-driven shows and things. What do you choose? And I choose the roles that are offered to me.
That's the secret.
Well, it keeps me working. I'm not sitting around the place, judging things. I work hard. I like to do it well because I've done it for a long time, and so I don't like doing a bad job. So I like to be good at. I like the character to be good.
Yeah.
And that's about it, really.
Alan, thank you very much for being with us on The Hatch. Really appreciate your time.
Yeah, good fun. Thank you.
I was a little surprised to hear him say that basically Lost is just sort of another thing that he did. Just because basically everyone else we talked to is like, even the guest actors, like, Lost was special. Lost really stands out. Like, people always want to talk to me about Lost. And I was kind of surprised when Alan's like, people don't really recognize me. I kind of have to tell them, like, I was Charles Widmore, and then it comes to them. I'm surprised by that.
Yeah, I think something that's unique about Charles Widmore is that he was on screen so little compared to how much he was discussed.
That's true.
Like, the specter of Charles Widmore was almost more important than the man himself. And secondly, he was one of the most, quote-unquote normal characters in terms of his existence was primarily in the real world, in a real place.
Well, until we found out that he left the island earlier. Right,
but we see him most often, when we see him on screen, it's almost always in a big fancy office in a real city, which I think as a viewer, especially a more casual viewer, it's kind of easier to forget those scenes.
Yeah.
Because they don't have that iconic, Lost look. Whereas if you see Richard Alpert in the jungle, for instance, or Ben in, Among the Others Village, or, the settings are so much more iconic that those memories, I think, are stronger. Whereas Charles Widmore is just more you know what I mean? I'm not.
Well, I think the memories being stronger is the key point, because I would tweak you on the idea that we mostly saw him in the real world, because by the end of the show, he did a bunch of. He did a bunch of episodes on the island at the end, and he also did a bunch of on island.
That's true.
Season 5 episodes. Granted, those were younger versions of him played by different actors in some of those scenes,
right?
But I think your point about the memories being what sticks out, when I think about Widmore. I don't so much think about the Widmore who shows up on the island at the end. I think about the guy with the McCutcheon whiskey in the office.
Same.
And I think about the guy in the limo with Desmond who gives him all the letters that he tried to send to Penny. There's something...
Yeah, and the guy in the bedroom when Ben comes back and threatens to kill his daughter.
One of the best scenes in the whole show, in my opinion.
I don't know. All of which, because they take place in the real world, maybe don't immediately go into the sort of lost scenes file in a viewer's brain.
This is maybe neither here nor there, but I'm curious if you feel the same way. For me, the stuff that stands out in my mind so much as the iconic stuff of Lost is mostly is the last season just kind of like doesn't place for me in that way. Like, so not that the last season wasn't good, because I enjoyed the last season, but just so much of what was fun about Lost was like the build up and the anticipation and the wondering and the not knowing and the trying to figure it out from week to week. So I think to me that's why, you know, with Widmore, for example, those earlier moments where we just got these brief glimpses are so iconic. Like, yeah, we got the full story later and we got to see his arc kind of play out to its finality, but that wasn't the most fun part.
Right, and what we remember, what we spent the most time thinking about was this Widmore.
Exactly.
It was not. We didn't have to think much about later Widmore because it was almost over.
Right. It was, and it was there, and we were seeing the resolution. Like,
right.
The resolution was not the part of Lost that we dwelled on for years and years.
Right. So
we should develop that idea more as we continue this podcast. I'm interested in this.
I wonder if that might play into why so many people felt like season 6 was forgettable.
Right. Maybe even if season 6 had been perfect in every way, it still would have paled a little bit in comparison to the seasons where we were waiting for season 6.
We might be onto something.
We might be.
Anyway,
we'll be back next week with Trisha Tanaka is Dead. It's a Hurley episode. It's the one with the Dharma van. You know the one I'm talking about.
I love this episode, and I think I'm going to have a blast talking about it, but I also haven't seen it in a long time. So
I don't think I liked it at the time, but I'm kind of expecting to like it more now, so we'll see.
Oh, good. We'll also have an interview with Dr. Derek Johnson. He's a professor of media studies and one of those scholars who was writing about Lost when it was airing and sort of helping us figure out what to make of Lost in terms of television, in industry trends, and things like that. It should be a fun conversation.
As always, you can find us on social media. We're on Twitter at The Hatch Podcast, also Facebook.com/The Hatch Podcast.
If you like the show and were to want to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or Stitcher or wherever you listen, we would appreciate it.
Our theme music is by Andy G. Cohen. Our cover art is by Danny Roth.
Talk to you next week.
Namaste.